I'd like to welcome you to this podcast. In this particular one, we're going to be talking about the most dangerous inmate in the penitentiary. And so I've expressed in multiple podcasts and little snippets that I do for YouTube that I kind of feel like I'm tired of seeing people that promote penitentiary in such a negative way. The stereotypes, really. And so you see a lot of people that get on there who've done time and they get on, podcast or they get on TikTok or one of these other apps and they like to talk about stories of what's taking place in the penitentiary, whether it be shankings or rapes or all the shit that people that have never been to prison for whatever reason find intriguing. I don't know, interesting. But my goal here is really just to go out to the prison industrial complex. So a lot of the things that you see, I'm gonna tell you straight up. I mean, I can only, again, I say this in other videos that I can only talk about the prisons that I've been on. And I've been on 11 prison yards in 2 states. I've been locked up in Mexico and I've been locked up in New York. And so I have a lot of experience in that, whatever you want to call it, that arena. And it wasn't a big deal until I started writing, and I wanted to get out and focus on the things that, for me, were important in regards to people who have done time and getting out and trying to figure out their lives. So there's a lot of things after studying for 3 years, because I've been out almost 4 years now. But studying social media, studying, I guess, the internet and all the things that you see, I began to see a reality of prison that is not reality. So when somebody gets on here and they take their shirt off and they show their muscles and they and the tattoos and they say, "Yeah, I was on a yard and this guy got shanked," and you have stories of violence. It's way more violent out here than it is in the penitentiary. Trust me when I tell you. But you have stories, and I've been on yards where guys would come on from another yard that I've been on, and they talk about that yard like everybody been on gladiator school. Oh yeah, that yard was a gladiator school. No, it wasn't. I was there for 4 years. It's not a gladiator school. Did people get fucked up on there? Yeah. Did violence happen? Yeah. So what? Out here, it kind of plays different because people see it. You know what I mean? And they see the movies, Blood In, Blood Out, American Me, and it's like, oh shit, this horrific situation. Prison is about the prison industrial complex, nothing more. It's about making money. Now, you create an environment in there that the staff uses to control us, to manipulate us. And these are the things that you don't know about because people get out and all they want to talk about is how fucking tough they are. And you might have been in a situation, and I'm going to show you some people. One of my brothers was about to get out, was a professional boxer. He was on the yard. We spent years on the yard. And when he was around, all these fucking so-called tough guys weren't so tough. Because the only thing you could do with him is get a one-on-one. Now, if you have 10 people, in the prison situation and against one, yeah, you have your chances. But if that same person has 10 people, then the only thing you can get is a fair one-on-one. And then you're not so tough. So I'm here to just dispel a lot of that bullshit that you see, because the more that we propagate the negative parts of the penitentiary, I'm not saying that shit doesn't happen. It's just not as prevalent as I've done 20 years. I've heard of 3 incidences where a guy got raped, and talk to one of the dudes, and when you start talking to him, you realize nobody was sitting there holding him down. What they did was they was able to coax him into being who he was. If you go in there and you partake of that shit, that's who you were before you got in there. So there's a saying that prison is a microcosm of society. For me, my goal is I want to show you how prison is a microcosm of society. Some guy was doing some YouTube and he was like, here's another guy who wants to care that we were in prison. I don't give a fuck what you care about. I'm not here to glorify prison. I'm here to show you how prison is structured, because for me, in the end result is you have a lot of people doing a lot of time unnecessarily. You don't know that out there because you're not in there and you don't see the case by case situations where people get sent to, 50 years for some shit that they should only got 4 years from. And once you're in there, you're in there. And unless you got money, you're not getting out. So with this particular series, I want to focus on prison as a microcosm of society. And this first episode is, who is the most dangerous person on the yard? Everybody out here, the majority out here would say it's the guy who could fight the best. It's the guy prone to violence. It's, willing to do some crazy shit. That is not the most, put it this way, it's not the most dangerous individual as far as the staff is concerned. Because we can sit back and we can stab each other. We can do all types of shit, go to war, riots. They say, helicoptered out, all these instances where they try to like make it seem like it's so profound. I mean, Lucasville was a real riot back in the day. I think it was 83. But you have instances where you have races go against each other, people get stabbed, whatever. That is not the most dangerous person on the yard. They want you to think that, they'll show it to you, but the most dangerous person is the person that can organize, that can come together and say, to the whites, to the blacks, to the Hispanics, we need to join forces because we can make our quality of living in here a whole lot better if we stand our ground in here. So I'll give you a case in point. When I was locked up in a yard called Kaibab unit. This was in Arizona. This was, I would say, 98, 99. And they had continually got us off the yard early for rec. So when you have a routine in there, it's the most important thing because a routine helps you get through your day-to-day existence in there. It makes it manageable. For me, it was always working out, writing, and pretty much reading. That was my main thing. So when you go out to rec, that is a very important part of your bit, of the time that you're doing. So you get staff, which is the main instigator of violence in there, the main instigator of drugs in there, the main instigator of phones in there, the main instigator of all the negative shit that's in there, the majority. I'm not saying that inmates aren't prone to negativity, but we're gonna do what we're gonna do no matter what. But it's a lot of that shit is propagated by the staff, particularly when it comes to each other. We're going at each other. So we're on the yard, and they kept getting us like half an hour early for no reason, because staff just wants to be fucking assholes about it. Well, one thing about Arizona penitentiary, same thing with California penitentiary, is that the races control the yard. They don't control it completely, but there's this give and take about, controlling the yard as long as we kind of stay in line and they stay in line. But in Arizona, they wasn't giving us our rec. So it was like one time 15 minutes, 30 minutes. So we just decided, all the races came together and said, when they call us off the yard, we're not going to lock down. And at the time, at this particular time, with Kaibab was, they didn't put fences on. Right now, it's really controlled movement, which is a level 4 yard means that everybody moves to chow together, everybody moves to the rec field together. And so that's how they're able to kind of keep the violence down, because you can only move in groups of like 15, 20, 30, whatever. So they got together, all the shot calls on the yard, and they would say, when the time comes to go in, we're not going to go in. So we didn't go in. And I could have been like, fuck that, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. You're not doing it. I don't give a shit how big you are. You're not going to go against the yard. That's just the way it is structured in Arizona. I'll get to Ohio at another time, because that's a whole fucking different situation. So we don't lock down at that moment. We just say, fuck it. So they give us one warning, and then they realize we're not locking down. By the third warning, they have what is called the A-team response. They're on the buildings, they got guns. And so they basically tell you, this is your last warning, and then they're just going to shoot somebody randomly. I mean, I don't know if they say it's going to be one of them rubber bullets or whatever, or a real bullet, but we already agreed once that warning came, we were going to go ahead and get off the yard. We made our point. So I said that to say this. We made our point, and then afterwards, people got tickets, but they didn't fuck with our rec anymore. Because for the first time on that yard, we showed our teeth. And so, but here's the thing. When they start going through the yard, they're trying to find out who's getting together, who's the person or the people responsible for this unified front. In that particular situation, they weren't able to find out who it was. But sometimes, like, when I get into Ohio, it's like you could be sitting down saying, if we do this, 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 and this, we could make our quality of life better in here. And then this fucking piece of shit over here, who's with the staff, and he might get an extra tray, or he might get some kind of benefit, he's going to run back and tell. and they're gonna say, Garcia or Smith or Jones, they was out there and they were talking about, unifying, and we're not gonna lock down, or we're not gonna go to chow, or with some kind of example that we can utilize to let them know that we're not just gonna sit here and take the bullshit. As soon as that happens, now we could be fighting and they just lock everybody down. Everything's cool. After a while, they let everybody out. Sometimes if somebody gets stabbed, the person who did it, they'll ride them out. But if you come up and you start unifying people together, it's a whole different ballgame. They will get you off that fucking compound so fast, it'll make your head spin. Because in there, the chaos, which I write books about the Illuminati, their mantra is out of chaos, order. So they create the chaos inside the penitentiary, whether it's racial chaos, whether it's, they give other inmates or races better situations over other races. In Arizona, like in Ohio, the whites didn't have pull like that. Arizona, they did. They were 40% of the population. And we was in situations where they had knives, like staff would actually give them knives. Because there's no way you're going to get a real knife in there unless somebody brings it in there for you. But in Arizona, they was able to do stuff like that. Whites had the privileges, and then the Hispanics, because they had the numbers, they had the same spirit of privileges, and the blacks didn't as much because they were only 17% of the population. In Ohio, it's a totally different situation. They don't have to do that because inmates are so weak over there. Not all of them, a good majority of them are not weak, but more than half will actually sell you out for whatever. They don't have a structure in Ohio. And that's why I tell a lot of people who get on here and they say, this is what prison is. Bullshit. They say when a pedophile goes to the penitentiary, he's going to get fucked up. No, he's not. In Ohio, they let them run free on the yard, and you can't touch them because that's a hate crime. So the most powerful person, or the most dangerous person as it pertains to staff, is an inmate that can think. It's an inmate that can, maneuver, knows how to bring people together. Finally, I'll bring this up. I'll give you another example. When I was I was on a yard, and this was in Ohio. I was on a yard called Marion. They had a warden, probably the best warden I ever been around. His name was Jason Bunning. He had a program for computers. He had all type. They had a program in there for inmates doing life who got plots where they can, grow vegetables and shit like that. And it's all part of rehabilitation. Now, again, if you're listening to this and you don't give a fuck, well, then you don't give a fuck. Why are you listening to this? But if you're trying to understand the penitentiaries, you're trying to understand how it's structured in there and how we can actually, benefit inmates when they get out, because they're getting out. And like I say this in other podcasts, is everybody thinks like you go in there for murder, that's it, right? And so, like that's the worst of the worst that you can be. But they're in there, they're never going to get out. What they don't realize, so they don't really give a shit whether a person gets rehabilitated or not. I'm talking about people out here. But what you don't understand is that there's people in there for crimes that are not murder, like drug dealing or whatever, who have committed murder or multiple murders. So now he's sitting in there, or she's sitting in there with a 3-year sentence. You're out here not giving a shit the way the prison system is run. So that person's not getting rehabilitated. That person gets out probably, in 3 years, right? They haven't been rehabilitated. They move next door to you. You get into it. Your son gets into it. Your daughter gets into it with this person, and this person kills that your daughter, your son, whoever, because they didn't have the structure. They had killed already. You just didn't know that. Now they're out, and they haven't had any kind of rehabilitation, no structure in there that was going to help them to rehabilitate. So they get out, they run into a difficult situation again. They have no coping skills, and the quickest way is to put a bullet in this person's brain. And you see it all the time. So with me, that understanding that the most powerful person in there is the person who would think, is I take that out here. I'm not going to sit here and walk around and show you my muscles. I'm not going to sit here and talk about how tough I was. I'm not going to glorify any of that. Now, we'll talk about that when I'm talking to other inmates, situations that have taken place. But I'm not gonna fucking glorify that. There's nothing cool about going to the penitentiary. I've done 20 years. Armed robbery, bank robbery, aggravated assault, drive-by shooting, attempted murder. Like, I have a record. I'm not proud of that record. I have a daughter that's 11 years in the military, in the Navy. Like, that's nothing proud. I made mistakes. I made choices. I don't like to call them mistakes. I just made choices that were fucked up. And I suffered the consequences to that. So now I'm out. My goal now is to basically take the penitentiary or the prison system to show it to you, dissect it, to change it, because I was fortunate enough to become part of a program called Horizon Program, and I'll get into that another place. But there was programs dealing with Jason Bunning who allowed me to kind of think about my defective thinking, to learn about it. I didn't know about that. I didn't know about personalities, the different types of personalities. I didn't know about common trauma, which is trauma that we deal with as young kids growing up. Not so much that like you got abused, but you're watching all this negativity on TV, all of this like just fucked up shit that's on TV, and you don't realize how it affects you. You just look at this generation and you can see that the choices that my generation, generation before it, the generation after it, you see TikTok, you see Instagram, all they want to talk about millennials, and they like to pit each other, pit each generation against each other. If I'm sitting here talking about this generation that's out now, and I'm talking about how weak they are, I did that. Where the fuck you think that came from? They didn't grow up to be the way they are now because they just grew up that way. We made them that way. And now we want to sit here and talk shit about them. So you just got to figure out what kind of society you want. Again, if you don't give a fuck about this, just change the channel. You're not going to hurt my fucking feelings. So with this particular podcast, I just wanted to focus on the idea that the strongest or the most dangerous inmate is not the most violent inmate. It's the one who could think. So now we're in a situation as we move forward with the Prisoners of Microcosm Society. I want to start breaking these podcasts, these solo podcasts down to show you, how they do it in there and how it parallels out here. When you take, Democrat, Republican, Trump, Kamala, and all this back and forth shit, that chaos is created because as long as we're separated, they have the power. When you come together, that's when they get afraid. And I got shit in the works dealing with social capitalism and all this other shit that I'm doing with my clothing line, with the podcast and with my books. My main goal is that's my dog acting up. My main goal is just to educate society and hopefully create a revolution with some of the thinking processes that were developed in the penitentiary. I know that shit sounds crazy, but hopefully once you hear them, you might think differently. So anyway, in this podcast, I thank you I made this real quick. I thank you for showing up, watching it, and look forward to the next podcast. I'm going to go ahead and make this video dealing with my writing because I have a playlist called The Writer's Path where I talk about how I got into writing. And for those who have been incarcerated or not, they're just writers and they want to kind of go over the idea of what it takes to write and the thought process. And so we'll be doing that in the Writer's Path in the next video. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Subscribe and share the video. Peace.